Amelia Hayes, at 29, was a quiet fixture in the bustling hive that was Etha Dynamics' Midtown Manhattan office. Her cubicle, tucked away in the Strategic Initiatives Department on the 32nd floor, was meticulously organized, a reflection of her analytical mind. Each morning, she'd emerge from her modest, sun-drenched apartment in Astoria, Queens, the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee clinging to her, and brave the N train. The subway ride was her buffer, a liminal space between the comforting familiarity of home and the high-octane corporate world awaiting her in the glass towers of Bryant Park. Amelia wasn't flashy. She wore sensible skirts and blouses, her dark hair often pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her ambition, however, burned with a steady, intense flame, fueled by a desire to prove her worth in a world that often overlooked quiet diligence in favor of loud bravado. She was an associate analyst, a title that barely scratched the surface of her true capabilities. While her colleagues focused on presenting pre-digested data to senior management, Amelia possessed an almost intuitive understanding of complex data modeling. She saw patterns where others saw chaos, anomalies where others saw noise. This skill, honed over years of self-study and late nights poring over programming forums, often went unnoticed by her immediate supervisor, Arthur Sterling. Arthur Sterling. The name itself seemed to carry the weight of starched shirts and icy stares. A man in his early 50s, with impeccably groomed silver hair and a perpetual air of detached superiority, Sterling was the embodiment of the successful, ruthless executive. He was a Virgo, and he lived up to every stereotype. Precise, critical to a fault, obsessively organized, and utterly devoid of warmth. His office, a minimalist temple of polished chrome and dark wood, was always pristine, much like the reports he expected from his team. He governed through intimidation. His voice a low, controlled rumble that could dissect a subordinate's work with surgical precision, leaving them feeling exposed and inadequate. Amelia had endured her fair share of his passive-aggressive critiques, the subtle undermining, the credit silently siphoned away. She knew better than to challenge him openly. Instead, she worked harder, hoping her quiet competence would eventually speak for itself. Her daily life was a relentless cycle of data extraction, complex algorithm development, and meticulous report generation, often stretching well past sundown, the city lights beginning to twinkle outside her window. The day it happened was a Tuesday, late September 2004. The leaves outside were just beginning to turn, a vibrant, fleeting burst of color before the drab grays of winter. Inside Etha Dynamics, however, the atmosphere was anything but seasonal. It was the crucial Q3 departmental review, a high-stakes presentation to the executive vice presidents for global operations and finance. Sterling, as head of strategic initiatives, was presenting the department's performance and projections. Amelia had spent the last 3 weeks practically living at her desk, meticulously crafting the detailed financial models and predictive analyses that formed the backbone of Sterling's presentation. Her fingers ached from typing, her eyes from staring at glowing screens. She had triple-checked every line of code, every data point, every projected figure. The conference room on the 34th floor was a sleek, intimidating space. A massive mahogany table dominated the room, surrounded by plush leather chairs. The air crackled with anticipation and the scent of expensive coffee. 6 senior VPs sat opposite Sterling, their faces a mixture of attention and weary skepticism. Amelia sat quietly in the back, a silent guardian of her data, ready to provide support if needed. Sterling, looking sharp in a bespoke charcoal suit, began his presentation with his usual polished delivery. He moved through the slides, a confident smile playing on his lips, occasionally gesturing towards a chart Amelia had meticulously rendered. Then, it happened. They were on slide 17, a critical projection of Q4 revenue based on Amelia's complex predictive model. A microscopic anomaly, a single data point that seemed to deviate slightly from the expected trend line, flashed on the large screen. It was so minor, so infinitesimally small that only an eye as relentlessly critical as Sterling's would have caught it, or perhaps only an eye looking for an excuse. He stopped mid-sentence, his smile vanishing, replaced by a scowl. His gaze, sharp and accusatory, pierced directly through Amelia. "Miss Hayes," he boomed, his voice cutting through the hushed room like a razor. It wasn't a question. It was an indictment. "Could you explain this aberration?" He pointed a manicured finger at the screen. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Amelia. She felt a cold dread creeping up her spine. She knew the anomaly. It was a statistical outlier. An unpredictable market fluctuation she had noted in her internal documentation, but deemed too minor to clutter the main presentation with. It had virtually no impact on the overall projection. Before she could utter a word, Sterling continued, his voice dripping with condescension. "Frankly, Amelia, this entire projection, this entire quarter, hinges on this. This sloppy, utterly unacceptable mistake. This is the kind of error that undermines confidence, that suggests a fundamental lack of rigor. You have spent weeks on this, haven't you? And you present us with this." His eyes narrowed, burning into hers. Then, with a slow, deliberate enunciation, he delivered the killing blow. "You know, Amelia, sometimes I question the wisdom of certain hiring decisions. Looking at this, frankly, Amelia, you are a mistake, a very expensive one for this company." The words hung in the air, echoing in the deafening silence. "You are a mistake." It wasn't just about the data point. It was about her existence, her competence, her very right to be there. The senior VPS shifted uncomfortably, some averting their gaze, others looking pointedly at Sterling, a flicker of disapproval in their eyes, quickly masked. Amelia felt her face flush, then drain of all color. Her throat constricted. Her meticulously constructed world, built on hard work and quiet dedication, crumbled around her. Her vision blurred, tears welling up, threatening to spill over. She couldn't meet anyone's gaze. The air suddenly felt too thick to breathe. She wanted to disappear. She stumbled out of the conference room, the hushed murmurs of the VPS a dull buzz in her ears, Sterling's scathing words a brand burned into her mind. She didn't go back to her desk. She fled to the deserted break room on the 31st floor, a sterile space of vending machines and fluorescent lights. Leaning against a cold, stainless steel counter, she felt an overwhelming wave of nausea. Tears, hot and stinging, finally escaped, tracing paths down her cheeks. The humiliation was absolute, paralyzing. "You are a mistake." The phrase looped in her mind, a cruel mantra. For what felt like hours, she sat there, utterly broken. She considered quitting. She would pack her bags, leave New York, and go back home to her small town upstate, where the biggest corporate drama was the local hardware store running out of nails. The thought was tempting, a gentle escape from the crushing weight of her failure. But as the initial shock and despair began to ebb, replaced by a cold, unfamiliar anger, something else ignited deep within her. The shame, instead of consuming her, forged a new resolve. This wasn't just about a single incident. It was the culmination of months, years of subtle digs, stolen credit, and deliberate undermining. Sterling hadn't just humiliated her, he had tried to erase her, to invalidate her very being. And that, she realized, was unforgivable. She wouldn't quit. She wouldn't let him win. A plan, nebulous at first, began to form in the shattered remnants of her composure. She remembered a specific project, a highly advanced predictive modeling system she'd been developing independently for months, sometimes years, in her off hours. She called it Project Cassandra, after the Greek prophetess whose warnings were always true but never believed. Sterling had scoffed at it once when she tentatively mentioned its potential, dismissing it as academic drivel and too theoretical for practical application. But Amelia knew better. Project Cassandra was designed to identify systemic inefficiencies and even fraudulent activities within large corporate structures. It was her magnum opus, her secret weapon. She had never fully unleashed its capabilities. Until now, the mistake comment in its brutal honesty had inadvertently revealed Sterling's hand. He wasn't just critical, he was desperate. Desperate to cover something up. Amelia remembered a recurring, subtle pattern of financial discrepancies in his department's budget reports she'd stumbled upon weeks ago while compiling her primary data. She had dismissed them as minor errors then, or perhaps complex accounting maneuvers beyond her immediate scope. But Sterling's perfectionism often meant burying inconvenient truths. His need to control the narrative, to discredit anyone who might expose a flaw, suddenly made chilling sense. Her secret plan crystallized. Project Cassandra wouldn't just be about demonstrating her worth. It would be about meticulously dissecting Sterling's own professional integrity. She would use his own meticulous data analysis against him. She would find his weaknesses, his hypocrisies, his mistakes. Over the next 2 months, Amelia transformed. Outwardly, she maintained her quiet demeanor, accepting the mundane, data entry tasks Sterling now assigned her, seemingly broken. She nodded, smiled faintly, and kept her head down. But beneath the surface, a cold, calculated fury propelled her. Her nights and weekends, once spent occasionally socializing or reading, were now dedicated entirely to Project Cassandra. She recalibrated its algorithms, shifting its focus from general corporate inefficiencies to targeted forensic analysis of Sterling's past projects, budgets, and vendor relationships. She legally accessed every scrap of internal financial data related to his department: old invoices, project proposals, performance reviews, budget allocations, expense reports. Every piece of paper, every digital file, was fed into Cassandra's hungry maw. The system worked tirelessly, cross-referencing public records of company registrations, news articles about past Etha Dynamics initiatives, and internal company databases. Slowly, painstakingly, patterns began to emerge. Flags started appearing: inflated vendor contracts, ghost projects that appeared on paper but lacked tangible deliverables, and a consistent pattern of underperforming initiatives hidden by convoluted reports and carefully worded executive summaries. The deeper Cassandra dug, the clearer the picture became. It wasn't just incompetence. It was a sophisticated web of financial mismanagement that bordered on outright malfeasance, subtly connected to a series of shell corporations and inflated invoices that pointed back to Sterling's direct involvement, or at the very least, his willful negligence. He had been using his meticulous nature to obscure his tracks, burying inconvenient truths under mountains of meaningless data. The mundane tasks he assigned her unwittingly gave her access to the raw, unfiltered data she needed, providing the very ammunition for her counterattack. Her second crucial step was to cultivate an ally. She recalled Eleanor Vance, a quiet but incredibly influential executive VP of global strategy, who had once praised Amelia's keen insight during a chance encounter at a company-wide seminar months ago. Eleanor had given her a generic business card, a polite gesture that Amelia had tucked away. Now, it was her lifeline. Amelia didn't rush. She waited until Project Cassandra had compiled an irrefutable, unassailable body of evidence. She condensed the findings into a highly encrypted, read-only thumb drive, stripping away any personal identifiers, presenting only the raw, undeniable data. The climax arrived during the annual Vision 2005 Corporate Strategy Summit, a high-profile event that drew top executives, board members, and major investors. Sterling was slated to be a keynote speaker, unveiling his Grand Cone initiatives, a presentation he'd boasted about as his masterpiece. 2 days before the summit, Amelia discreetly emailed Eleanor Vance, requesting a confidential meeting. Regarding an internal analytical project of significant strategic importance, she wrote, her tone carefully neutral. Eleanor, intrigued, granted her a 15-minute slot late that afternoon. In Eleanor's tastefully understated office, overlooking the concrete canyons of downtown, Amelia was calm, almost serene. She connected the thumb drive to Eleanor's secure laptop. "Miss Vance," she began, her voice steady, "I've developed a predictive modeling system, Project Cassandra, designed to enhance financial transparency. It's identified some consistent anomalies in our historical project expenditures. She clicked through a series of anonymized charts and graphs, the data laid bare. She didn't accuse Sterling directly. She simply presented the irrefutable evidence. How Sterling's proposed, innovative, project for 2005 was strikingly similar to a failed initiative from 3 years prior, complete with the same inflated budgets and suspicious vendor partnerships. More damning, the data showed a clear, statistically significant pattern of financial mismanagement under Sterling's watch, subtly connected to a web of shell corporations and inflated invoices that pointed to direct malfeasance, not just incompetence. Amelia explained the methodology, the data sources, the statistical significance of each flag. Eleanor, initially polite but skeptical, grew progressively graver as she absorbed the meticulous detail and damning implications. She recognized the gravity. She asked pointed questions, and Amelia answered each one with precise, data-backed responses. When Amelia was done, Eleanor sat in silence for a long moment, her expression unreadable. The summit was packed. Sterling, radiating confidence, took the stage. He launched into his presentation, a slick, bombastic show of charts and buzzwords. He spoke of growth, innovation, and unprecedented efficiency. He was halfway through when, unexpectedly, Eleanor Vance, an unscheduled presence, walked onto the stage. The murmurs rippled through the audience. Eleanor, composed and authoritative, took the microphone. She didn't mention Sterling directly, nor his presentation. Instead, she praised the company's unwavering commitment to data-driven integrity and proactive risk management. She then announced a new internal initiative for enhanced financial transparency and accountability, spearheaded by a remarkably insightful analyst from our Strategic Initiatives Department. Then, the screens behind Sterling flickered, replacing his polished slides with a series of raw, anonymized charts and graphs, Amelia's work from Project Cassandra. These were the very charts she had shown Eleanor Vance. They visually depicted systemic financial discrepancies, project overruns, and questionable vendor relationships within specific departments, without naming names. The inference, however, was deafening. Questions were immediately raised from the audience about the integrity of past projects, about hidden costs and accountability. The room shifted, a palpable change in atmosphere. Sterling, watching his carefully constructed facade crumble live before his eyes, his masterpiece, eclipsed by the stark, irrefutable truth of his own making, began to visibly sweat. His confident smile faltered. The board, represented by its formidable chair, rose to announce an immediate, comprehensive internal audit of all departmental budgets and historical project performance. Focusing pointedly on the very areas Amelia's data had flagged, areas Sterling had overseen. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within weeks, the internal audit, guided by the precise parameters Project Cassandra had highlighted, uncovered enough concrete evidence for a formal internal investigation into Arthur Sterling. The company's legal team, armed with irrefutable data, moved swiftly. He was suspended, then quietly fired, the official reason given as failure to meet performance expectations and serious budgetary discrepancies. The public statement was carefully worded, but the message resonated through the corporate grapevine. His career, built on a foundation of meticulously hidden flaws, was effectively over. Amelia Hayes, meanwhile, was promoted, not just to a senior analyst role, but to a newly created critical position, head of data integrity and predictive analytics, reporting directly to Eleanor Vance. She received a substantial salary increase, a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Bryant Park, and a team of junior analysts eager to learn from her. The revenge was complete. Arthur Sterling had called her a mistake, but she had systematically, methodically, and brilliantly dismantled his empire with the very tools he disdained. Yet, as Amelia sat in her new office, the city lights twinkling below, she felt a complex mix of triumph and an unsettling hollowness. She had achieved justice, She had proved her worth, but the journey had transformed her. The cold fury that had sustained her had left a permanent mark. She was sharper, harder, more cynical. The bitter taste of public humiliation still lingered, occasionally resurfacing, but it was now tempered by the quiet, deep satisfaction of knowing she was never a mistake. She had been a threat, an overlooked force waiting to be unleashed. The cost of victory, she realized, often includes a piece of one's former self, sacrificed on the altar of vindication. She looked out at the vast, indifferent city, a labyrinth of ambition and consequence, knowing she was now a formidable player in its intricate game, forever wary of the power dynamics she had so expertly navigated.